Welcome everyone to our webinar today, Providing Feedback. Today's webinar is brought to you by State Farm and Safe Kids. We have two wonderful presenters today. We have Tammy Franks and Suzanne Latoya. So today's objectives, by the end of the session, attendees will be able to describe ways to establish trust when working with parents and caregivers. Also, assisting participants in developing their language for providing feedback. Review the elements of effective feedback when working with child passenger safety technicians and instructors. So we'd like you to meet our presenters. We have Suzanne and Tammy. Both have over 20 years of experience in the child passenger safety field. Both ladies share a strong passion for the health, safety, and well-being of children, and have dedicated their careers to that service. Both have been recognized on the local, state, and national level for their work. Tammy is the Oregon CPS State Coordinator and coordinates the CPS program at Randall Children's Hospital at Legacy Emmanuel, and currently serves on the National Child Passenger Safety Board. Suzanne serves as a maternal and child health program consultant, where she coordinates and manages multiple programs within the maternal and child health program at Wake County Human Services. And she is also a former member of the National Child Passenger Safety Board. So ladies, we are delighted to have you with us today and are looking forward to the information that you'll be sharing with us. So take it away.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you so much. This is Suzanne Latoya. Let me first say what an honor and a privilege it is to be co-presenting with Tammy Franks. And Tammy and I have both shared a passion for working with families, parent caregivers, technician and instructors, and just certainly enjoy being able to be with you today. We're going to kind of go back and forth today with the slides and share some information with you. Next. So when we talk about what is communication, we certainly know that we could take the remaining time that we have today and really dissect and really talk about communication. The one thing that we know, we've obviously put the true definition of communication up on the slide, but one thing that we firmly know is if you ask 10 people what is communication, you're going to get 10 different answers. And I think that leads us into our desire to really dive more today into what is effective communication, because you're going to get so many answers from people and how they like to be communicated to. Next.
So good morning, this is Tammy, and I am also delighted to be sharing this information with you today and presenting with Suzanne. So thank you so much for this opportunity and your commitment to community education as well, and improving your communication skills, hopefully, through this webinar. So we know as child passenger safety technicians that we have to communicate in multiple arenas on a daily basis. It could be with family and caregivers. It could be within our organization or the community doing presentations, doing car safety seat checks. It could be with fellow technicians and instructors. For each of us, it looks a little different depending on our role in child passenger safety and how active we are, and whether we're a technician or an instructor. But to help us with this, and next slide, please. The Child Passenger Safety Board has developed a code of conduct and commitment, and this is available on the board website at www.cpsboard.org, and you can also find a link from it from the certification website for Safe Kids. And so, next slide, please. As we look a little bit more closely at the sections of the CPS Code of Conduct and Commitment, where it really talks about communication, breaking out the segment where for the families you serve, you'll see I've highlighted the bullet points that really address our communication skills and reminding us as technicians what our responsibilities are, or the guiding principles. So we want to remember to be polite and professional and to provide good service to all families and caregivers. to listen to people. And sometimes we have so much to share that it's hard to remember that we need to listen, but also to remember to acknowledge their strengths. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the presentation, and to be respectful. And so that's when we're talking about the families, but also, next slide, please. As we're looking at the CPS Code of Conduct and Commitment, when we're working with our colleagues, we need to trust and respect them, and to make sure to share our resources with them as well. So as we move forward, Suzanne's going to talk a little bit more here on the next slide about establishing trust. Next slide.
One thing that Tammy and I firmly believe when we talk about communicating with parents and caregivers and technicians and instructors is that with the experience that we've had, that we know that if there's not trust established, we really, really wonder how effectively that communication is going to happen. So we want to always say, and how do we establish trust? Well, obviously, we want to keep our word and follow through with our actions. We always say if we tell someone we're going to call them, we're going to call them back. If we tell someone we're going to email them, we're going to email them back. Sometimes our timelines might not be the same, but particularly with parents and caregivers, this is something that we need to make sure that we do. We know that we want them to get the accurate information, and certainly with us, we know that in our certification process that we've been educated on those proper steps, and we want them to seek the information from the right sources. And obviously to learn how to effectively communicate with others, which would be a great example of the entire presentation today. Taking time to build and earn trust is something that we take a great deal of work, and I know that there are probably folks that may be on here from the public health arena, and sometimes we have programs that we can work with and partner with. One of the programs that we have here that has been a really big help for us is high-risk intensive home visiting programs. If you have access to those in your communities, many times you're going to find very good staff that are going to be going out with families on a regular basis and seeing them repetitively. And that is something that is great to build these partnerships that you can work with to help to establish the trust in that time that sometimes it needs to happen. Think before acting too fast, obviously, and then valuing the relationships and not taking those for granted. And we always say just helping people whenever we can, and certainly doing what we believe is right. And I always like to tell people it's okay to admit our mistakes. I think we've all been in situations, particularly when child passenger safety, when we may see a tech working with a parent or a family, and they've made a mistake. And I've certainly done that before. And it's okay to admit mistakes. I sometimes think that we put so much time into becoming that expert, into being trained, that we would absolutely just don't want to admit that we may have done something wrong. And I think sometimes, to be honest, it can be very humbling and actually help further that relationship. If I've told a parent, hey, you know what, I've missed something here, and that shows them that it's okay for them to be overwhelmed and to think that this is really challenging to do. I think it almost humbles the situation a little bit, and it humbles us and how they feel with us to say they've made a mistake too. And we really think that that can be a good bridge into helping establish trust. Next. So we talk about what we call the 7 Bs of effective communication, and a lot of this kind of goes back to that last slide and developing that trust. But obviously, what we tell people is, think about this. If someone truly feels like when they come to you or you're working with them that you are present and you are there for them, that you're interested in what they have to say, that you're being respectful of them, that you're inviting to them, and that you're a good listener, that's going to carry you so far. But if someone comes and feels like you're looking at your watch, you're in a hurry, you're rushed, you might not let them get out everything they want to tell you about what's going on. That's going to be something I think that immediately is going to have the potential to really shut down communication, particularly for it to be effective and for them to take away what we want them to take away from what's being said. So we always say that being creative and being positive is something that's good, but sometimes just stopping to listen. You may have someone that absolutely on that day doesn't feel like anyone's wanting to listen to them. But sometimes, as you all know, by being open and listening, you may determine something and a reason in their thought process for maybe what they've done and why they've done what they've done. And that's a very important one, we think, definitely to share. Next.
So as we move forward, we want to focus a little bit about how you walk the fine line between providing feedback and criticism. And these are ways that we communicate with the families or other child passenger safety technicians or people with whom we interact on a daily basis. And as we look at child passenger safety as a whole, we know that misuse rates are very high when talking about car safety seats. Looking at the curriculum, quoting anywhere from about 74 to 90% misuse rates. And so when we use that as our starting point, it can lead us to um, wanting to communicate negative thoughts. And so how do we provide positive feedback? So let's look a little bit at the two different definitions between feedback and criticism. And then what we'll do is apply these in real world situations or questions. And these were submitted by people joining us for the webinar today. So thank you very much for helping us build our scenarios to help provide language for you to work when you're working with families. So when you're looking at the term feedback, and I'm going to read the definitions to you because I really want to stress some of the language or the words that are used when defining feedback. It's the transmission of evaluative or corrective information about an action, event, or process to the original or controlling source. And so you'll see in there the word evaluation. And that's very important. Keep that in mind as we move forward to the next slide. And as we talked about the definition of criticism. Next slide, please, Kim. You'll see when we talk and we define the word to criticize, that's to consider the merits and demerits of, and to judge accordingly. It could be to evaluate as well. So thinking back when we were talking about feedback, both feedback and criticism are ways of providing evaluation. But you'll notice with criticism, as you continue through the definition, we really stress that when we're criticizing somebody, we're finding fault or we're judging. And so keeping that in mind, how can we move forward communicating in a positive atmosphere, or communicating in a positive manner to our families, and helping or other technicians, and helping to provide positive feedback rather than negative feedback, which would be considered criticism. Next slide.
I think we've probably all heard before the Maya Angelou quote that I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And, obviously we want to point out in the situation in our field, we don't want people to forget certainly the information that we have provided them. But if someone, and I'm sure that we all on this call have had a situation where someone came to us for us to provide education and assistance, and everything that they had presented right in front of us was absolutely wrong. And it's the old joke that we say, you want to call people over, you just can't believe what you're seeing. But we firmly believe you've got to find one thing that they're doing right, and you've got to find that open-ended, and it may be, this is the cutest child I've ever seen, or it is so awesome that you've taken the time to come today and to work with me to help you learn, about your vehicle or about your child restraint. What we will tell people is this. Obviously, we don't want people to forget our information. However, I do want them to leave and realize and feel good about how I did make them feel, or we did. If I truly make someone feel like they're doing everything wrong, that they're embarrassed, that that they're breaking the law possibly even, and have these concerns, if they've left and they feel like I have not worked with them properly or made them feel bad about themselves, they are not going to seek me back out. They are not going to come back to me as a technician. They're just not going to do it. They are not, and don't we want them to come back to us? We certainly do. Now, do we want them to come back to us every time they move a child restraint for us to certainly be an installation service? Absolutely not. But I tell people this, it takes us, about 4 days to become nationally certified, and then we need to really get a lot of practice and experience. It takes us a long time to learn the information and skills that we need to So we're expecting for the parent to gain a lot of information in a very brief interaction. So we know many times they may come back for us, and they may come back to us and have questions, and we can guide them. So we always want to remember that we want to help people. We want people to leave and never forget how we made them feel. And we really think that that is something that is kind of a guiding principle for us. Next.
And I'm going to add a little bit as we move into the next slide with that. That also applies to when you're working a checkup event and you're working with other technicians, or when you're teaching a course and you have a course assistant comes in and helps with the course. Always, I think if we can view ourselves as always being in a mentoring, nurturing situation, so that we're always trying to help others learn. And I think one of the first things as we look at the elements of that effective feedback is to remember to be polite and professional. Sometimes we may have an inside voice that's going, oh my goodness, like I've never, as Suzanne was saying, you're having a difficult time finding something positive, but there's got to be something positive there to point out, if nothing else, that they have the passion or the desire to be there with you. And then I think listening is just so important for everyone, and especially when you're working with other technicians, is to remember to listen to everything that they're saying. Sometimes we slip up and we make an error, but we may catch ourselves. And so to give them that chance rather than correcting them immediately, or maybe their process is a little bit different in presenting the information, but listening to them, making certain that all the information is shared that needs to be shared, but it may not be, recognizing that it may not be in the same order that you're going to be presenting that information. Again, whether it's to another family or even when talking with another technician. I think one thing that we use quite often here on our team is to acknowledge that child passenger safety can be really confusing, especially to caregivers. There's a lot of information sources out there, and we often have people who come to a checkup event and have been researched in multiple areas, and maybe don't have the best information available to them, and so helping to the caregivers to navigate that information, but also helping to provide them with reliable resources. So sharing those resources, and that just again comes to knowing your resources and developing professionally as a child passenger safety technician. So not only do we constantly need to work on our communication skills, it's also so important to keep up on our technical skills so that that can help us with our communication skills, because we know where to find the information. Another thing that we really need to focus on is remember who your audience is. Always educate at their level. And so that could change multiple times throughout the day, depending on your family, depending whether you're talking to another technician, and even different families in your settings may have very different education levels. And so being able to talk to them so that they understand, so that we don't get lost in the terminology, and sharing and educating at their level. And as Suzanne says, reflecting back to that last slide, let's stay positive. Let's acknowledge strengths. And I think everybody brings a strength to the table or a talent to the table, and we need to find that talent and really acknowledge it. So what we're going to do now is move through a series of scenarios and helping you to develop your feedback language. So I'm going to turn the first couple over to Suzanne, and then I'll join you back in a couple more slides. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Great. And Tammy will probably jump in with me too. Certainly. And again, like she said, thank you so much for submitting these, and wish that we could have open dialogue with all of us about these. But this is one of the how do you handle this situation. The family's pediatrician has provided erroneous information about child occupant protection laws and or transportation recommendations to the family. So ask yourself to think about, what would be your feedback language. Now, I have personally seen this handled in two ways. One was a great example of positive communication, and one was a very poor example of the negative. And I certainly can say, and I'm sure many of you can say, that your first instinct is to pick up the phone and to really say, this is to be, some people maybe to be a little aggressive with that. But the one thing we go back to this is, what's the positive that we can find in this situation? Well, obviously, we're going to want to first correct that information with the family, okay? And that's something that certainly would be to say to that family, and a suggestion may be, hey, I'm so glad that you came and that we're able to talk about this. And I would certainly say and remind them that the pediatric providers have so much information to provide in such a short period of time. The good thing is that they are talking about child passenger safety and transportation, and I would say that it can be an ever-changing field. I would never want to discredit in any shape, form, or fashion the pediatrician, and keeping in mind that that may be a potential partner that we have. I do think on the flip side of that, when you talk about your feedback language, is contacting that pediatric provider. And something that could be really, really awesome to do is to say, I would offer my services to come. It may be as simple as saying, would you be interested in me coming to do an in-service for your staff? Would you like for me to come to a staff meeting? And introduce them also to current appropriate resources. And I know that we've referred to that, and we're going to refer more to that before we hang up today. But certainly we are resource rich in our field. We really are. Between the certification website, NHTSA, manufacturer's instructions, we have AAP, we have the National Child Passenger Safety Board. We also have lots of resources on the local level as well. So the factual local level information is there. And we just simply want to make sure that we try to circle back with that pediatrician and certainly share with them that there is an up chance, and I'd love to come, and thank you so much for including this information. And that might be a strategy. A lot of people in a lot of different parts of this country, and many of you on this call have, I'm sure, gone and done in-services and provided information about it. And we even have had some pediatric providers send staff through certification courses. And so it really is a great opportunity to talk to the family, not to discredit the pediatrician. The positive in this situation is that they are providing information, and we never want to do anything, certainly, to discredit that. Tammy, anything you think about that?
No, I think for the one talking point that I really use is with the family is just saying to them, gosh, I'm so happy that your pediatrician is talking to you about this, but I always make certain to have a handout available where we promote the best practice recommendations and also the laws in both the states that are near where we're located, so that we have something to show to the families that we indeed are providing the most up-to-date information. So just, because sometimes we don't have that relationship with the family that a pediatrician may. And just letting them know that they have so much to think about, and thank you for letting us know, because now we can talk to help to reach out to the pediatrician office as well.
Sure. Next. So we want to do a poll with you and tell us what you think, and we'll lead into our next situation. But in general, do you think technicians are positive in their responses to posts online that do not show best practice? We would love to hear what you all think. And I think as you all are voting and that screen's up, I think we can go to the next scenario, which goes right into follow-up for this. And that's awesome. So we are saying that 59% are saying no, and I definitely think that we would be right there with you for sure. So that's very interesting results for that poll. Thank you for participating. So let's go in and talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. So the caregiver is active online and has received misleading or incorrect information from an online resource. That, again, goes back to, and I'm sure many of us, and we want to say this with all sensitivity, but I think we've probably all noticed some folks that are don't hold anything back, certainly when they're online, maybe responding to something that they're seeing. Again, we want to reference those online resources that we've talked about and to always use factual information. And again, we say we have so many resources that we can utilize. But the one thing that we really want to say is that we all see so much activity online and so many comments made, and certainly some folks would be aggressive with it. And, my thought is, what do you do? Do you unfriend somebody? Do you chat with them offline? Ideally, I think offline is a better way to go. I think we have seen folks that are great and they'll say, hey, would you like to talk? I'd love to chat offline with you or give some facts. But we also have seen kind of the ugly side of that. What we call it social media shaming almost. We're like, look at this, it's ridiculous, or do they, and what a bad parent. I mean, I've seen some really bad things. And what I say to people is, many of you are parents on this call, and would you want someone to call you a bad parent? No. And what we would want to do is have an opportunity to be educated, but to be done properly. If someone says something negative to me online about that, then what happens is we see many times the people get in a back and forth and we lose the message. The message is, how can we properly restrain this child based on best practice, and how can that child live to be a happy and healthy adult, basically? So we frequently get into that and we lose that message. And we want to just really say we want to circle back to those resources. Next.
Okay, so the next question our scenario that we're going to deal with is when you're working as a child passenger safety technician and perhaps put yourself at a checkup event and another child passenger safety technician you notice is providing information that is incorrect, maybe contradicts the instructions for use from the child restraint manufacturer. And the first thing I would encourage you to do as a technician is to think about how you would like to be approached if that was you. We all make mistakes. And so thinking about that, and again, I'm going to kind of encourage you to remember to listen. Remember that information may be presented in an order that's different than what you do, but that doesn't make it incorrect. But this technician may also catch themselves when they provide incorrect information. But if you do find that it's incorrect information, it might be helpful if you have the instruction manual available to find that information in the instruction manual and to call that technician over to you, or maybe just say, may I speak to you for a moment, please, or I need your help over here, and pull that technician aside. And another thing is that when you work with the families, you can explain to the families that, oh my goodness, there's so much, again, acknowledging there's so much to know in child passenger safety and to remember, and that we want to use the model that we're using, the instruction manuals, and that we have two sets of eyes on every scenario to help double check our work. And sometimes we miss things. And as Suzanne said earlier, be humble, recognize your mistakes and address them. And so just really, rather than just saying, oh my goodness, that's wrong, right in front of the family, is there a way that you can be a little bit more professional in handling it, and choosing your words very carefully, and really just perhaps pulling that technician aside if need be. Suzanne, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I would just say, even as instructors, remember, we do make mistakes. So we instructors make mistakes, and I think being able to pull an instructor aside and talk to them, but certainly I will say this, and I really stand by this, and I think everyone on this call will do this. There's a right way and a wrong way to correct an instructor or a technician. One of my mentors is Alan Buchanan, and he taught me many years ago locally here that when you're an instructor and you're working with a tech or even another instructor, are you going to correct them right at the vehicle? No, you're not going to do that. You're going to pull them aside, and you might say to the family, I hate to interrupt this. Can I chat with him one moment? Share it then. But I would never discredit a tech or an instructor, but just remember, we all make mistakes. Next slide.
So probably one of the stickiest situations that was presented to us and how to deal with this and talking with this instructor would be somebody who perhaps the instructors in the state was not supportive of becoming a child passenger safety instructor, and that person went out of state and got his or her candidacy, and now they would like to teach in state. And how do you deal with that? And so the first thing that I do, and as a state coordinator, I work with instructors all the time, and I'm not saying that this is, please no, not the case with us, but just how would I deal with this? I look at each of the instructors and what talent they bring to the teaching team, and how can we balance them? But also encouraging our instructors to mentor one another. So how can we work together? Identify, that instructor that went out of state to get their instructor candidacy, they're a passionate person. They have a desire. They sought out the opportunity. They know what they want to do. So let's look at it as a mentoring opportunity. And I think also when you're in this situation, can we take a step back? Is it a personality issue with somebody else, or is it really a concern for their technical knowledge? Because there's ways that we can deal with both. We can build it, if it's a personality issue, we can build a technician team or an instructor team that will help to work with the personalities to best match the personalities with more suitable personalities. If it's technical knowledge concerns, then we can help to mentor this new instructor, and maybe by team teaching. Helping to have a very thorough instructor team meeting prior to and throughout the technician course. But remembering that mentoring process doesn't stop when you become an instructor, that we continue to be mentored on a daily basis, and every time we're doing child passenger safety. And if you really are struggling, I do encourage you to reach out to your child passenger safety state coordinator, and you can find that person on the cpsboard.org website. There's a list of everybody and also what their responsibilities are so that you can understand their role better in assisting you as well. But to always try to approach the situation as positively as possible and find that talent that new instructor has to offer to the team and a way to tap into that resource. Suzanne, anything to add to that?
No, I think we're going to go right to questions for time's sake, for sure.
Okay.
Great. Carrie, do we have any questions?
Yeah, actually we do. And if you do have questions, please go ahead and type them in. If we don't have time to go over it today, you do have Suzanne and Tammy's emails and phone numbers if you wanted to brainstorm. Actually, Natalia wrote, not with a question, but more of something that she does. She just wanted to mention that with all her checklists, she calls the family back to see how everything is going and congratulate them if their baby's been born. Also to ask if they have any questions at that moment. All the time, they are grateful and happy for that updated phone call.
That's awesome strategy. That's awesome. Fantastic. Thanks for doing that and setting the bar so high. We'll have to steal that. That's great.
I need some more staffing too.
That would be what we need.
Profession.
Sure.
Yes.
Christina wants to cycle back about admitting a mistake. She says, don't you think that admitting something, missing something, or a mistake actually undermines the caregiver's trust in you? In my experience, usually doing so leads them to questioning everything else you've explained to them.
Well, here's the thing. If I don't admit it, I mean, how am I going to correct it? I do feel like, I don't think it undermines, this is the thing that I see too. It kind of comes with manufacturer's instructions. We have folks that don't want to refer to manufacturer's instructions that work with me sometimes because they think that parent doesn't think that they understand how to use that child restraint. I haven't met anybody yet, and there may be a few we could start naming that know absolutely every set of every manufacturer's instructions on every child restraint that potentially could be circulating out there or vehicles. I think it's how you tell that parent. And I think sometimes you can even say that. But I still, for me personally, will stand by it's how I tell them that might have been an error. But I certainly, for me, I don't think that it undermines that relationship. I haven't witnessed that personally. Tammy, any thoughts on that for you?
I would agree, Suzanne. I don't think it undermines at all. I think it shows that we're all human and we have to use our resources. So promoting that learn, practice, explain, showing that hands-on, looking at the manual. And there's many times where I'm pretty dang certain of the answer if I've done that same install 4 times in one day and I know the answer, but I'll still model to the caregiver that, I'll say, gosh, let's check where the handle needs to be during transportation and pull out the manual because I want to model to them that I need to check my resources because I don't know everything and I can't remember everything. People will often say to me, how do you know that? And I said, I don't know that. It's not committed to memory. I know where my resources are and I check my resources. And so admitting that you don't know I think is fine, but because you're showing them, you're building that respect, you're showing them that you know about your resources and where to find that information.
And real quick, I know we're short on time. Another strategy that I have seen in the field, which I kind of like, is I do have witnessed a couple of techs that it depends on what the area is possibly or what it is, that have actually turned it around as misuse. If let's say I've done something wrong that may be truly something that they can visually see, and I think, oh gosh, I shouldn't have done that. What if the parent, you could say, do you see anything here that might look strange to you? You might be able to turn it around and correct your mistake and include them in more of a kind of a misuse scenario with them.
Well, and that's true, and I almost laugh at myself sometimes. Maybe I misthreaded a harness as I was helping the family or demonstrating to them, and I'll kind of laugh at myself and say, "Oh my gosh, see how easy this is to do." I mean,
that's right.
So I do this every day, and I still sometimes struggle with it. And so I think it's important, again, going back to acknowledging there's so much to know about child passenger safety, and we can't know it all. We have to know our resources.
Okay, maybe just two more. One is a question. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between factual, and rumors from other texts that are not necessarily factual, but are presented as facts?
Repeat that really quickly for me, Carrie.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Okay, repeat that for me.
Sorry, she wrote it up, but I was trying to figure out a better way to do it. It's a little bit. So, can you talk a little bit about facts versus rumors from other technicians that are presented as facts? So, rumors versus facts, and how do you know how to tease them apart?
So you're saying that the rumors would be like misleading information or incorrect information perhaps, but they're presented in a way that it seems factual or that type of thing? Am I understanding that correctly?
I mean, that was how I read it. If Christina, if that's not it, please, after the call, just
contact
give one
us.
Yeah, reach out to us, please.
Oh, wait, she did. Sorry, she did. She just clarified. So there's a lot of shared information amongst and between texts that are really rumors and not supported by the manufacturer. So I think what she's asking is, how can you tell rumor from fact? Or
verify with the manufacturer. Yes, if it's manufacturer related, please. Yes.
And there are some things, for example, we deal with a lot like our washcloth rolls or crotch rolls allowed around the buckle, our rolled blankets allowed in the car safety seat. And sometimes that's not in the instruction manual, and somebody will say, oh, that manufacturer does allow it or doesn't allow it. And I'll also look to the frequently asked questions on the websites for the manufacturers. So I think if any time that you feel that you question that makes you go, I'm not sure that's correct, I always say, hey, I just need it in writing to be able to teach it in the hospital setting or in my setting. Do you have that in writing? It just helps because I have to, for liability reasons, I need to have that. But I think really just, again, promoting the resources, knowing where to find that information and having it documented. Suzanne, anything different?
You hit the nail on the head. That was fantastic. And for me, I'm never going to speculate, and I'm going to do exactly what you said, is verify that with a manufacturer for sure.
Okay, thank you. She said that the crash roll is a good example. I know that we're out of time, but we have one more question from Sarah, and I think this is probably more common than we think. She says, you know what? They have frequent flyers, families who continue to have kids and return for seats. Their misuse makes it seem as though they've never received any education when she knows that's not the case. Their body language and attitude at appointments appears that they are not interested in our education. Do you have any suggestions or advice on what to tell those parents?
But they're coming back, right?
Yeah, they're obviously coming back. Yeah. I would be careful with referencing how many children they have, or one thing I say was we never know someone's situation. We never know that situation. And we certainly are never, and Tammy and I are never also going to in any way say we should be breaking the law. And sometimes I will tell you in my time with the populations that I work with, many times, I know we're short on time, and I'd love to talk offline with whoever asked this question. Many times that individual is giving you, I want to say attitude or that arms closed because they are actually embarrassed and feel that they don't know what they need. If they're coming back, to me, that is a sign that unless they've been told to go, but if they're coming back to you, that's an opportunity, and I just see that that's the positive in that. And I also can tell you this, and I've had some extreme situations where I've had to stop and say, you having a rough day today? I don't give them back what they give me. I don't believe in that. But I would say, would you like to maybe reschedule to come back at another time? I feel like maybe you might have some other things in your mind or some other things going on. I think it goes back to that empathy. But if I give them any attitude, they're probably going to give that back to me. So again, feel free to chat offline about that as well.
And I think too, Suzanne, with the frequent flyers, I mean, I think maybe, we each present the information a little bit differently. And if they're coming back, it shows that they're passionate to me. It shows that they're concerned. And maybe if I'm not able to present the information in a way that they're able to use the car safety seat correctly, so the next time that we see them, that they're using it correctly, maybe another person on the team can help them.
Great idea.
And reach out to them differently. And maybe just by using different words, they might have that aha moment. They may connect a little bit differently with that family.
And we just get a little clarification that it's not so much about the communication, and this might be a no seat issue, but they're coming back they're able to provide no charge seats. So it's not somebody coming back to get their seat checked
free
again
seat.
and again, which really kind of changes the dynamic a little bit, and maybe more than what we have time for today.
It will be. That's another webinar.
That might be another webinar.
But just remember something. When people pay something for something, they have ownership in it. But that's another webinar. Definitely.
Yes.
Thanks for the clarification.
There you go. There you go, Kim. Sign us up. We'll do a webinar on that. I'm sorry. Was that Christina?
Turn it back over to you guys. I turn it back over to Kim.
All right. Well, thank you, Carrie. We had some really great questions, and Suzanne, Tammy, you did a wonderful job in answering them, and we appreciate so much the time and preparation in providing us with this information. And challenge all of us, instructor and also technicians, to be very truthful and to make that trustworthy connection, so that we can really share a lot of good information, but also have a happy customer at the end of the day. And I would ask all of us to be thinking, when you do see some positive things in the field, to compliment that person. Thank you for taking time with that parent. They needed a little extra help, and you made the time for it. So thank you. So thank you all for what you're doing out in the community, and wish you well. Again, Suzanne and Tammy, thank you so much.
Thank you, and please feel free to reach out to us with any questions.